Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our guests, if I can call you. And just before we start the formal part of the meeting, some of you may be new and not fully aware of what goes on. My name is Bill Hunt. I'm the chairman. I'm an elected member. Along here are colleagues who are councillors, and they will be listening to the evidence, making comments and voting. Along here, and my vice chairman is also a member, and then officers will be here to advise us on any technicalities or legalities. I don't suspect it'll be relevant today, but we normally have a comfort break at about 2 hours or whenever it seems appropriate, if it's between two items. You can either go out of that door there and turn left, or you can go out of this door here and just go straight on for the toilets if you wish. And if you're waiting for a particular agenda item and you want to leave after your item has been dealt with, then please do so, and or stay on and listen to the rest of the meeting if you wish. Okay, we now then get on to the fire safety precautions, which Jane will read out.
Thank you, Chairman. There is not due to be a fire alarm. If the fire alarm does sound, then please make your way out of the building via the nearest exit, which is down the staircase you came through, or the fire escape in the chamber, which is down the back. Please do not leave use the lifts, and the fire assembly point is in the front car park near the exit barrier. Thank you.
Okay, we go on to item number 1, apologies and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from councillors Ambrose Smith, Akinwale and Holtzman, and Councillor Huffer is here in attendance as substitute for Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you very much. And now item number 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Huffer.
Thank you, Chair. I am predetermined on agenda item number 4. I have a statement I would like to read out to address the planning committee in my role as district councillor, and then I will leave the chamber until the decision has been made.
You can either read a statement out or make a statement,
yes,
verbally, as you wish.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
And only you will go to the
indeed
desk,
yeah,
and then once you've done that, you will leave the room and
I will exit
no
gate
part
right.
in that.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's fine. Chairman's announcements, and I've already commented about the comfort breaks and the toilet locations. So we move on to item number 4. And if we can have the officer presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This is agenda item 4, change of use to garden land and relocation of the access at land northwest of 3 Arthur's Way in Fordham. This slide shows the site edged in red, and the black line is the development envelope boundary. The next slide is an aerial view of the application site, and we can see the arrow pointing to the proposed garden land, and we can also see Arthur's Way situated behind it. So the application seeks a change of use from agricultural land to domestic garden land associated with the orchards to Seymour Road. The proposal originally included the provision of a garage and a driveway. However, these have been removed from the proposal following officer concerns around the impact of the proposed development on the character and appearance of the area. The plans have also been amended during the course of the application to relocate the existing access to avoid the root protection area of the tree at the front of the site, as you can see on this plan. So the main considerations are the principle of development, visual amenity, residential amenity, ecology and climate change, and it should also say highway safety on there as well. So on to the principle of development. So policy growth 2 states that outside development envelopes, development will be strictly controlled, having regard to the need to protect the countryside. Development will be restricted to the main categories listed in the policy and may be permitted as an exception. providing there's no significant adverse impact on the character of the countryside and that other local plan policies are satisfied. The change of use to garden land is not an exception, and the proposal is therefore contrary. However, paragraph 47 of the NPPF states planning law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So while the proposal is technically contrary to Grove 2, there has been development in the immediate area which has resulted in a change to the character and appearance of the area, and the land is now surrounded by development on 3 sides. It's not large enough to be reasonably used for agriculture, and the garden use is likely to be the most compatible when considering the surroundings. So on to visual impact. As I said, it's situated between the residential dwelling and existing garden land at the orchards to the west, and to the east is the access to the development of the 4 bungalows to the rear, which is Arthur's Way, and that also sits behind the application site. It's not in an isolated location with residential development and gardens surrounding it. Further to this, the character of the surrounding area has changed since the adoption of the local plan. Both the dwelling to the west, the orchards, and the dwellings to the south, Arthur's Way, have been approved, built and occupied. There's also no built form proposed as part of this application, as I set out earlier. Under previous applications, efforts have been made to protect the character and appearance of the countryside. The dwellings at Arthur's Way have permitted development rights removed for Class A, which is extensions, B, additions to the roof, C, other alterations to the roof, and E, buildings in the curtilage. And an application was submitted for a 1.8 metre high closed-bore fence to the front of the land subject to this application, which was refused on the basis of visual harm. So in light of that, consider it would be reasonable to remove permitted development rights for outbuildings and development within the curtilage, and permitted development rights for gates, walls and fences to prevent inappropriate enclosure of the land, and that it be reasonable to condition that the land should be used as garden land in association with the orchards and for no other purpose. So this plan shows the existing block plan on the left and the proposed on the right, with post and rail fencing to the front and hedge and tree planting on the boundary with Arthur's Way. So I've also got some site pictures. So the one on the left-hand side is looking from the end of the proposed garden back towards the road, and the one on the right is looking from the front to the rear boundary. And then in this slide, the picture on the left is a view towards the site. The brick walls and building that can be seen in the foreground is the access to Arthur's Way, and the building in the background is the orchards. The picture on the right-hand side is the existing access being used by construction vehicles during the build of the basement of the orchards. So it's considered that with the imposition of appropriate conditions, the proposal would not result in a significant adverse impact to the character and appearance of the area, nor result in significant harm to the countryside, and is therefore considered to comply with policies ENV1 and ENV2 of the local plan. So on to highway safety. The land proposed to change use includes an access which is separate to that which is used to access the dwelling. It was established that that's an existing access, but it would need to be upgraded for the proposed use. The local highway authority commented that to make the development acceptable in highways terms, the access would need to be constructed with a metalled surface for a length of 5 metres, and a means of surface water inception would be needed across the access prior to the highway boundary. But in providing the measures requested, it would have resulted in conflict with the oak tree to the front of the site. So to avoid any potential conflict with that tree, it's been proposed to relocate the access slightly to the west. There has been concern raised that that relocation would make exiting the site very dangerous. However, the local highway authority have assessed the proposal and have raised no objections. So in the next slide, there's just a close-up of the plan I showed you earlier, just focusing in on the access with the existing on the left and the proposed on the right. So in respect of other matters, it's considered that the proposal would not result in any adverse impacts to residential amenity, and with a suitable condition would provide biodiversity net gain. Okay. So the planning balance. Whilst the proposal doesn't accord with policy growth 2, it would not cause any harm to the character of the countryside, which is a key aim of the policy. It's considered to be acceptable in all other aspects and complies with all relevant local plan policies regarding those considerations. It's therefore considered that no demonstrable harm would arise from the proposed development. The surroundings of the site have changed since the adoption of the local plan, which has resulted in the application site being surrounded by built form. However, the built form and impact on character of the area have been carefully considered. The change of use of land is considered to be acceptable as no built form is proposed, and it considered with the appropriate conditions that the character and appearance of the countryside would be protected. So in summary, the lack of any demonstrable harm to the character of the countryside, the lack of any other detailed harm, is considered to form a material consideration of sufficient weight to warrant a departure from the local plan in respect to the strict application of policy growth 2, and is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. We now go on to a parish council statement read by Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Statement from Fordham Parish Council. The Parish Council have no objections to the change of use of the agricultural land to garden land. However, the proposed access onto Moor Road is directly next to a blind bend, giving restricted visibility and an addition dependent on regular maintenance of the hedgerow, which cannot be guaranteed. This is a single track road with no street lights, which is heavily used by farm track, dog walkers, runners and members of the public wishing to access the Riverwalk, and will create a dangerous situation. The committee must understand that Moor Road is a narrow road and is a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit. The Parish Council will refer the committee to condition 8 of the original outline planning approval, reference 17/00871/OUT, which states the existing accesses to the site shall be permanently and effectively closed, and the footway/highway verge shall be reinstated in accordance with a scheme to be agreed with the local planning authority within 28 days of bringing into use of the new access. Reason, in the interests of highway safety in accordance with policies COM7 and COM8 of the East Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2015. As stated by Highways, this important condition is in the interests of highway safety, and the Parish Council would ask how such an important condition can be ignored or overridden. It is clear that the Highways Surveyor, Mr. Geoffrey Elwood, understood the seriousness of the situation to recommend this condition in accordance with HW 7A. This access may well be an existing access to the field/paddock, but this was only used for very seldom for agricultural use and for cattle and horses with little vehicular use. The Parish Council asked the committee to carefully consider this issue. It would not want to say, "We told you so." Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now we have Councillor Hupper. And I will ask you to sit there when you've finished so that members can ask you questions.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for allowing me to address you this afternoon. I will be brief. This site has been a thorn in the side of the Parish Council and both of the ward councillors for the last 2 years, with numerous complaints from residents and neighbours about the breaches of planning conditions, too numerous to mention. Now we have the situation of the 2-metre solid fence finally being replaced with a more suitable post and rail fence, but with a gate for access on a blind corner for no apparent reason. The applicant has tried on several occasions to try and obtain planning permission for this piece of land. In fact, an application for a 10-metre by 6-metre garage was recently withdrawn. And whilst I appreciate this committee can only comment on what is before it today, the fact that the applicant is still insisting on this access would suggest it will not be long before that application will be back in front of you. There is no justification for a potentially dangerous exit onto this road used by a steady stream of walkers, riders, farm vehicles, residents' cars and delivery vehicles. I would ask the committee to approve the fence, but remove the access gate which serves no purpose, and to ensure that all future development rights for this site are removed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, have you got any questions for Councillor Huffer? Yes, Councillor Trapp.
The access gate, that is on the present application form rather than the one that is further down Arthur's Way. Why do you think it's so important to not have it there?
Because it's on a blind corner. There is a steady stream of walkers, riders and cyclists. Anybody exiting that thingy will not be able to see who's in the road until they're already committed. There is no reason for an access gate in garden land. He can access his garden from both sides around there. It's absolutely, there's only one reason and one reason alone to have an access there. And that's to build something in that garden, which is what he's been trying to do for the last 5 years.
Okay, we can't actually.
I know, I fully understand, but you asking why I think it's so important to remove it. This is part of the reason, is that people walk with dogs, children walk with, parents walk with small children. It's in the summer, it's a lovely route for children from that end of the village to walk through. They walk along over the bridge, round the River Snail, into the recreation ground and to school. It's just going to be a nightmare. Where he's been doing the underground cinema room, I cannot tell you the amount of traffic jams that have been bizarrely, that have been caused by too many farm vehicles trying to access that land while his delivery lorries are coming there. People were late for school on 4 or 5 occasions because they couldn't get out. It's a narrow, narrow road, as you saw today. You can't pass 2 vehicles along there. You have to pull onto the verge. And why would you have an access there? There's no reason for that kind of access unless you're wanting to drive a car onto it. Why would you need to drive a car onto your garden?
Isn't there access already to the is it
Through his garden? Yes, 2C, through his garden, yes. Unless you want to drive a car into your back garden, why do you need an access?
I see. So okay, thank you very much. So there's another access to the house from the front. So what we saw was the back of the house at the moment.
Yes.
And there's an access on the other side.
If you further up, if you go back up towards to Carter Street,
yeah,
there's a large grey gate. That's the access into 2C.
Okay.
He's already got an access into his house, is what I'm saying, where he drives his cars now.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Lay.
Yes, Councillor, I'd like to know what the parish council want done with the access that exists at the moment.
Well, as the parish council pointed out, when the original planning permission was given, it stated quite clearly that all accesses other than the one on the main one going into where the 5 bungalows are had to be removed. For some reason, that has been completely overlooked. And he's now asked for another access and they're saying, okay, well, there used to be an old field gate there. Well, there was one old field gate there, but there wasn't a second entrance into Arthur's Way, which was created on the understanding that any other accesses were removed. He's now asking for an access to be reinstated. That was specifically mentioned in the original planning application, that any other accesses had to be removed. And for some reason, this has been completely overlooked.
Councillor Wilson.
So he has an access in through the main house. Don't know if you can see it. If you go down the moor, there's an access there into his house there. And the garden goes all the way around to the side. He just wants to loop the garden up. I get the garden. I get the post and rail fence, because he stood in the development with me some 2 years ago and said, I want post and rail, I want post and rail. I said, I think that really would be really sympathetic to the area. And then he put up a 2-metre high boarded fence, which was overturned it was refused. He went to appeal, it was overturned. He was asked to remove it, which he did, and then he went back 6 inches and put up the green metal fence that you can see.
What you're saying is that that metal fence that we could see on the left-hand side, which is a fence against the little road that comes off.
Yes, that in theory, that will be removed and be replaced with the post and rail fencing that he promised he would do 3 years ago.
But there's no entrance into that little road from there.
Into his house, yes. That's all part of his house. That's all part of his curtilage. So he has access to his garden. There's only one reason you put a double gate with a tarmac fence, a tarmac entranceway into a garden, is because you're going to drive a car into it.
Yes.
And I repeat, why would you drive a car or anything into your garden?
Councillor Trapp.
So there are garages associated with the other entrance, is that right?
Yes, he's got garages behind his house. Yes,
Okay,
but
so
he
the
put in an application for a further 3-car garage, which he has withdrawn, which has been withdrawn at the moment.
Okay, but that is to the east of the site?
It's behind the main house, at the side of the main house. You
Thank
can't
you.
quite see it from here. I know where it is,
So
but I could
it's-
point it
it's a
to.
This is for garden use.
This is for garden use only.
And this is, okay, thank you very
So
much.
why would you need a 5-bar gate with a 5-metre entrance into it, tarmacked, unless you're going to drive a car into it?
Members, is that it? In which case we go to the officer, and have you got any more comments you'd like to make as a result of what's gone before?
I was just going to say on the subject of the fence, there is actually a separate application for that at the moment, and we saw that post and rail fence is there on site, so that doesn't actually technically form part of this application, but as I explained on site, that corrugated fence will be removed and the post and rail fence is in situ. Just to clarify regarding the access, there is a separate access to the dwelling. When this application originally came in, there was an existing access there. I did raise concerns about having an access into the land, but it was existing, so felt I couldn't insist on its removal. Then Highways commented that they wanted upgrades to it, and so to avoid conflict with the tree, that's why they've moved it slightly. So there is an existing access there that we saw today that I felt I couldn't sort of get them to remove because it's existing. The moving of it has happened to avoid conflict with the tree.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Rachel. Sorry, just for clarity in my mind. So you're saying the bit about the tarmacking and the 5-metre is to satisfy Highways concerns, it's not actually what they asked for in the first place.
Yeah, that's correct. So Highways have asked for that. That's not something the applicant proposed.
I believe Councillor Trapp had his hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. How wide was this existing entrance? Do you know?
Yeah, it's what we've seen today. So the access where the bus parked and we walked through, that's the existing access.
But was that access seemed to be created as part of with the condition of the fence? Because there was a park and rail fence,
Mhm.
and then there was a metal fence.
Yep.
Was that metal fence constructed after the post and rail fence?
To be honest, I don't know if that was before
So,
or
I mean,
after.
what I'm saying is, was there a continuous fence there already? And then this was broached for access to that land?
I believe there has been a post and rail fence across the whole in the past. There was a field access. I think they closed it off for a bit while they were doing some construction work and then have reopened it. But I've asked Highways if they consider that the access you saw today is the existing access, and they've said yes, they do.
But what I'm trying to say is, was that access put in there just to help with the construction, or was it existing well before?
It was an existing access, to my understanding.
Okay, I think the
Thank you.
planning. Thank you. I believe the planning manager has something to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. As the officers pointed out, there was a historic access there, which if you looked at Street View, you can see where the curbs drop down. A couple of points to be made. Obviously, this land was outside, from what I believe, the red line for when the house was granted. So therefore, any conditions would only relate to the red line when the house was granted. So therefore, any stopping up or things like that would need to have been either inside the red line or if there was a blue line inside of that. Otherwise, obviously, the condition wouldn't meet the tests of a circular. Secondary to that road is not classified. Obviously, members will be aware that permitted development allows for the creation of an access on a road which is not classified. So as long as it is for the purpose of that land, so if that land was agricultural and they wanted to bring on vehicles, then they could create the access. At the moment, they're using the land under permitted development rights for the construction work. Again, if that access road was created for that, that would then meet that requirement of the GDPR as well. So we have no enforcement mechanism to get rid of the existing access, which members will have seen today. What you have in front of you, obviously, is an upgrade which has been suggested by the Highways Authority. So I'd clarify that point just to manage expectations.
Councillor Lay, you've got a question for the officer.
I have. What I can't understand is if we had planning terms before which related to this access, why on this application are we overlooking those original planning terms? You know, I can see quite easily why, having looked at the site, the use of that land for a garden looks all right by my book, but to open it up so that future development can take place on there, I cannot understand if we had planning terms before, how on earth we could overlook them. Thank you.
So I believe that existing access closure was requested by the Highways Authority as part of that application. I've had a look through the previous officer report. It's from 2017. There is no specific in the officer report about why that was requested, except for the reason given in the interest of highway safety, but nothing beyond that I could see. What I would say is that the highways officer that was mentioned in the parish council statement is the same highways officer who has commented on the current proposals. This has been to the Highway Authority twice, so in the initial before the access was moved and since they've proposed to relocate it and they have not objected. So we haven't, I'm not overlooking that, but we have consulted the correct consultee on that front and they've raised no objection.
Okay, any more members' questions for the officer? Okay, and in which case we move into debate and away you go, members. Councillor Lay.
Do you know, I see no reason to turn this application down as such, but you know, we should be putting in clauses to close that garden off so that any future development is restricted. I don't think there is any reason to turn down that land for garden use, but I certainly don't believe that we should allow them to do that and give them access onto that road. Thank you.
You have read page 7, bottom of page 7, where the members are recommended to approve subject conditions as summarised below, and the conditions can be read in full on the attached appendix 1.
Yes, I've read that, but I do believe, as the parish council do, that they will come back and want planning permission on that land in at some future time, and I think we should close the gate.
We do have the application in front of us, and we do have to consider that, and what my thoughts are of the future are not relevant really today, I'm afraid. Any other members debate? Councillor Trapp.
It seems to hinge on the access, really, isn't it? I mean, looking at that land, it's perfectly suited for the garden. It's not going to be used for farming, which would be the other thing. And it's all really whether I can also see that a large garden like that, you would not like some access there. I don't sure from the plans whether there's access from the rest of the house, from the other entrance all the way to the garden, but most gardens have access through the front. And it's if the present access is fine enough, I'm not sure why it should be moved. That's what so if there's an existing access, surely it stays there and doesn't move and isn't improved.
Yes. Just going for Councillor Goodall.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The reason why the gate has to be moved is because of the 5 metres of tarmac that has to be laid, and the roots of the tree will be affected. So it's to protect the tree is why the gate's being moved, so that the 5 metres of tarmac can be laid as per the traffic regulations.
Any more debate? Councillor Wilson.
I'm not quite sure what we're able to do, but if we don't think there's any need to put 5 metres of tarmac down extra to access this garden, which presumably the only thing that I could think would go through there might be a motor mower for mowing the lawn, that wouldn't need a tarmacked driveway. So it does seem to be unnecessary, that access, and I agree with what Councillor Huffer said, that you know, there is no good reason for having a main entrance to a garden if the house has got a main entrance to his own garage and to his house. So I don't know whether we're in a position to say that we accept the garden use, but not the access element of this request, whether we can split the thing up and give him only half what he's asking for. I suspect we're not allowed to do that, but we could put a boundary requirement in, and the boundary fence, which could cover the whole of it, including where his access is as a fence. I think we would be able to do that as a boundary condition to the piece of land.
We have gone past questions to the officer, but nevertheless, I think it would be sensible for Councillor Wilson's request to go to the planning manager and get his view on this.
Sorry, can I just ask the member to clarify what condition is he's seeking? What are you seeking to control?
I would suggest that the condition would be that the boundary treatment would be this post and rail fence all round the garden, including the bit across where there is an entrance, because the entrance is not required.
So we would need to justify why we consider it not to be required. Because we don't have any technical highways objections of it coming onto the road. And as I alluded to before, what I've been desperately trying to do while I've been in this meeting is find out whether or not those previous conditions capture that piece of land. Because if they don't, the existing access point that they've got would be in permitted development and therefore unenforceable against. So what you're effectively seeking to do is restrict them from a lawful use on their land. So that's why we need to be very careful about putting such a condition on. So I would respectfully say I think such an approach would be risky without further. Clearly, that might be something you could defer for us to come back to and give you full advice on. I don't have enough information in front of me to be able to give you a confident answer as to whether or not legally we're able to do that.
Is it? Yes, you come back, Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Lay.
If we're not able to do it, we could in fact just turn down this application totally on the grounds that it isn't a garden. If it's got a big garden motorised entrance to it, it's not a garden that he's actually trying to do. So perhaps what we ought to be doing is coming back and saying we reject the whole application. If you can't reject a portion of it, then we probably need to reject 100% of it.
Councillor Lay.
Yes, I'd like to go back to the planning officer and really put the question that if we can't have an answer on whether or not we could enforce that access not taking place, then surely we should put this on one side until such times as the planning officer comes back to us and gives us an answer that is either one way or the other.
Just bear with me, please. I'm doing my very best to do it while you're talking.
I think this is an important enough point to just suspend things for a few minutes.
Sorry, Chair. I was looking at the planning application back in 2015 for the building of the main dwelling, because the red line does cover this bit of garden land. The only condition I can find on that planning permission is condition 6, which would have been of any relevance, and that states that prior to the first occupation, any gate or sorry, bring that down to me. Is that better? Sorry, so condition 6, which was placed on the consent for the dwelling, states prior to the first occupation, any gate or gates to the vehicular access. Now, this is the vehicular access that's shown on the plans that were approved about time, not this element of garden, should be set back a minimum 6 metres from the near edge of the highway. There is no actual restrictive condition on that planning permission which says that those gates or any other places should be stopped up, but I can see. So I'm assuming that will be related to the Arthur's lane development and not this piece of land.
Is that clear enough, Councillor Wilson? I mean, it means there is no option.
I think what we're being told is that we can't stop up this gap, but we can stop him moving it, and that I think we've got permission to do, haven't we? Or any way to stop him moving it is to reject the whole application.
You would need to have sound planning reasons to say why moving it is harmful.
We're going to bring an end to this soon, but Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Chairman. The way I see this is what a lot of people seem to be concerned about is the applicant complying with a request from Highways to protect the oak tree. As has already been said, what his future intentions might or might not be, we can't debate here. And in planning terms, I can see no reason to go against the opposite recommendations with the conditions as set out.
So are you making a proposal?
Yeah. I'd like to second the proposal because there's no way we can turn this down legally.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposal and a seconder. Any other members want to either propose some action or second some action.
or debate?
We can continue the debate if you wish.
What I'm not clear about is, so,
We have a proposal and a
Yeah.
second there.
what I'm not clear about is why highways is insisting on, is it because it's moving that we have to have a metalled track? Is it because it's contained? If it is already an existing opening into that land, cannot not say as it is, why does it have to be metalled? Is that a consideration that highways is imposing to keep that entrance? Or is it because it's widened or some other way changed? So it's an existing entrance, as I'm not sure it is actually, but I don't think it was an existing entrance. It looks to me like the fence was there, but if there is an entrance, is it to perpetuate this entrance that highways is insisting on this?
From what I can understand, the reason that highways will usually ask for the 6 meters of hardening is to allow for a vehicle to be pulled off the highway and to be sitting on a material which will then not be dragging foreign material onto the highway. So basically, because this is coming under a planning application and therefore we have control over it, they are seeking for that condition to be added on, basically to stop mud and or gravel or whatever from being dragged onto the highway. That's usually why they'll request that element of hardening to the site. Obviously, if it wasn't moved, and as I've alluded to, I believe that it was built under permitted development, there's no requirement for them to do that when they're doing it under PD. But in this instance, because this has been done in a planning application and therefore we have control of the highways department, they're asking for that sort of upgrading of it to protect the highway network.
Thank you, Councillor Goodall.
That explanation is good, but this is an unadopted road. So what rights do the highways have on an unadopted road?
This is, as I just alluded to, it's because this is a planning application and therefore we have some control over the matter. They're seeking to bring it up to their standards. That would be, obviously I'm not a highways engineer, so please forgive me if I'm stepping slightly out my lane here, but that would be my gut feeling as to why they're asking for that.
So I think we've been into this with some detail, and is anybody else going to wants to contribute as part of a debate? In which case we have a proposal, we have a seconder, we have it proposed by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Goodall, that we accept the officer's recommendation and approve this application. Now, will those in favour of that action please raise their hands? Will those who are opposed to that action please raise their hands? And is anybody abstaining? No. So that application has been approved. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. And we'll move on. So that was 6-3, was it? Was it 5 or maybe? No.
Which I miss?
One abstention.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, Hubbard's not here, is she?
Councillor Hunt.
There's still 8 of you.
Hmm?
There's still 8 of you. Who did you get? Just like.
5-3.
I got 5-3.
So, okay, that's it. 5-3 and that's approved. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, that does add up to 8. My maths wasn't working then, was it?
Right, we now move on to agenda item number 5. And can we have the officer's presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Agenda item 5 relates to 116 Ashley Road. The application is for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of a replacement 1.5-storey dwelling. This slide shows an aerial image of the site to the left together with a location plan showing the site outlined in red to the right. The application originally sought permission for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of a 1.5-storey detached dwelling. Whilst officers considered the principle of a detached dwelling on the site to be acceptable, concern was raised to the visual impacts of the proposal, mainly as a result of its complex design and overall scale and footprint. Revisions to the scheme were requested to reduce the scale of the dwelling. Amended plans have been submitted by the applicant's agent, which are those being presented today, and are for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of a 1.5-storey replacement semi-detached dwelling. The slide shows the existing site plan to the left and the proposed plans for the replacement dwelling to the right. This slide shows the proposed elevations, the front and western side elevation at the top of the slide and the rear and eastern side elevation at the bottom, with a grey hatched area showing where the dwelling would be adjoined to the existing dwelling at 118 Ashley Road. As you can see on the front and rear elevations, the ridge of the dwelling would sit approximately 0.65 metres, which is 1.2 feet higher than the adjoining property. The ridge line would also be set back in relation to the adjoining property, and this can be seen on the eastern side elevation drawing to the bottom right corner of the slide. The main considerations which are relevant to the application are the principle of development and the impacts of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area, residential amenity, highway safety, parking and access, trees and ecology, and drainage. Members will have read the officer report, which sets out officers' assessment of the proposal in full. The following slides will highlight the main points raised within the report. In terms of the principle of development, the application site is located within the Newmarket Fringe development envelope. The proposal is therefore considered to accord with the aims of Policy Growth 2, which seeks to focus development within the existing settlement boundaries. This is subject to all other material considerations being satisfied. These photos show the existing bungalow and its relationship with the adjoining and neighbouring dwelling. As members will have seen on site this morning, this stretch of Ashley Road comprises a number of modest semi-detached and detached bungalows. The dwelling would have a greater height than the adjoining property at 118 Ashley Road, and the ridge line would also be set back from the ridge of the adjoining property. It's considered that this would result in an uncoordinated and disjointed appearance between the two properties, with the proposed dwelling visually dominating the semi-detached pair. The design of the dwelling includes a number of competing features and roof forms, which would not be sympathetic to the character and design of the properties within the street scene. The dwelling would have a gable roof form with only a partial hip, which is in contrast to the traditional hitch roof form on the adjoining and neighbouring dwellings. The combination of the roof height and alignment, together with the design of the dwelling, would be detrimental to the visual amenity of the site, adjoining property and wider street scene. This is contrary to policy ENV2 of the local plan. Moving on to residential amenity. The proposal is considered to have an acceptable impact on the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties. It's considered that the position of the dwelling within the site would prevent any harm by way of overbearing and overshadowing. The relationship with the neighbouring properties and the placement of openings is considered to prevent harmful overlooking between the properties. Moving on to other matters. The impact of the proposal on highway safety and parking is considered to be acceptable. The proposal would utilise the existing access into the site, which would be widened as part of the proposal. The driveway would be able to accommodate parking for at least 2 vehicles, with space retained for on-site turning. The proposal is considered to have an acceptable impact in terms of trees and ecology, and it is also considered that an acceptable drainage scheme could be achieved on the site. In terms of the planning balance, officers acknowledge that there will be some benefits to the scheme through the creation of short-term employment during construction. This benefit, however, carries limited weight and is restricted by the scale of the development, which is for a single dwelling. It's considered that the scheme does not accord with the development plan as a whole, and that having considered the benefits of the scheme, there are no material considerations that indicate a departure from the development plan is warranted in this instance. In summary, the proposal, due to the height of the dwelling, its roof alignment and overall form and design, would visually dominate the existing semi-detached dwelling that it would be joined to. This would be detrimental to the visual amenity of the semi-detached pair. Furthermore, the dwelling, by virtue of its significant footprint, height and overall design, is considered to be out of keeping with the character and appearance of the existing development in the wider street scene, and would appear congruous within its setting. The proposal is contrary to policy ENV2 of the local plan and the aims of the NPPF. The application is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I see you've already got your position. You've got 5 minutes, and make sure you turn your microphone on.
Thank you. Hello, my name is James Melville-Claxton. I'm the agent for this application. And my client is seeking to create their forever home in Newmarket, having lived there for 15 years and being locally employed in the horse racing industry. 116 Ashley Road is a dwelling that is of its time in terms of design, materials and construction. The last occupant lived in the property until she passed away, and it is in extremely poor condition, requiring extensive works to make it habitable. Demolition and rebuilding the property allows us to create a sustainable home, which would accord with East Cambridgeshire District Council declaring a climate emergency and help the local authority deliver modern housing stock in its district, which mitigates climate change. From their time renting the neighbouring property 118 Ashley Road, the applicant would like to replicate its characteristics and design in their proposals for 116. We can deliver a large proportion of the proposal using permitted development rights afforded to the existing dwelling, but in terms of viability and sustainability, this approach would not be effective or efficient. As part of the planning application process, an assessment was made of the Ashley Road street scene, and it was noticeable that there is a significant level of variation in terms of design in each dwelling. This includes a range of story heights from single stories through to 1.5 and 2-story dwellings. In addition, variations in the orientation of ridge lines and the overall roof forms is apparent as well. There is no set materials palette along Ashley Road, with each plot displaying its own variation in materials used, meaning it is reasonable to suggest that there is no one characteristic that dominates the street scene. The conclusion was also made within the officer's report for the approved application at 106 Ashley Road, which is for a loft conversion which increased the ridge height of the existing dwelling. That report detailed that Ashley Road is considered to have a mixed street scene with a mixture of bungalows and 2-story dwellings at different heights and designs. That proposal increased the roof heights from 2.5 metres to 3.4, which is an increase of approximately 90 centimetres. For comparison, the proposed increase of 116 would be 48 centimetres. As part of the design process for the proposal before us, all of those aspects have been taken into consideration, as can be seen through the proposed footprint, heights, materials, and the articulation achieved within the designs to create a proposal that is sympathetic to the existing street scene, whilst taking into consideration the dogleg within the plots where the bungalow sits, which limits possible variations in design. The proposal before us is the most efficient design in balancing the use of the plots against protecting the amenity of neighbouring properties and achieving the standards required by current building control regulations. The proposed footprint is also in keeping with other dwellings along Ashley Road. This is seen through the extent of the proposed footprint being in line with the existing build lines for 118. For example, the proposal extends no further into the back garden than the extent of the attached neighbour. We've matched the eaves heights, and we have replicated the layout of the attached neighbour's property within our designs as well. The proposed ridge height is lower than that of the adjacent dwellings, such as 120 Ashley Road. It's lower than the ridge height proposed in the previous detached version, which was at a height considered acceptable by the planning department and is at the minimum height required by the current building control regulations. Furthermore, the existing chimney provides a vertical element on the roofline that forms a break in the transition between the two properties, which would soften any noticeable difference between them. Notwithstanding that, a similar palette of materials has been proposed, render over brick elevations and slate roof tiles, which would further reduce any perceived differences between the two properties. By councillors approving these proposals, a dwelling that meets modern living standards can be achieved, which is of a size and scale that accords with the existing dwellings in this location. Furthermore, it would support the applicant's need to continue to live and work in Newmarket. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? Councillor Lay, that was your finger, that was it yesterday? Right, you ask. Away you go.
Yes, I have three questions for you. The adjoining property, 118, is that a bungalow?
It's not, no, it's 118 is a 1.5 story dwelling. So within the roof, there's an existing bedroom, which is currently being used as an office by the applicant.
So it's not putting a 1.5 story extension on to a single story property that's there at the moment.
Correct. It would be a 1.5 story dwelling on a 1.5 story dwelling.
Okay. What is the footprint of the adjoining building that your client lives in?
So I've got a bit of a list to provide a comparison for footprints along Ashley Road itself. For 118, the existing footprint is approximately 168 square meters, or in feet, that would be 1,808 square feet.
And the proposed new dwelling, what is the square footage of that?
So the proposals that we've put together, the square meterage would be 189 square meters. In feet, that would be just over 2,000. It currently sits at 80 square meters.
And last but not least, the properties that are around you, do you have any idea of the square footage of those particular properties?
So as I mentioned in my speech, there are a number of different story heights along Ashley Road itself: single story, 1.5, and 2 story. So accordingly, we've got a significant variation in the amount of footprints for each of those dwellings. So we're proposing a dwelling that's 189 square meters. And I'll just give you a flavour of what's sitting along Ashley Road. So 124, which as you're looking at our site is on the left, that is currently 187 square meters. Number 122 is 178 square meters. 120, which is the next property to ours, is 170 square meters. 170 square meters. And then we've got 118, which is attached. And then the next property to the right of ours, 114, is 105. And then 112 is 190 square meters. So in terms of what we're proposing, it's very similar in size and scale to the existing properties that are located along Ashley Road itself.
Thank you very much for those figures. Do those refer to gross internal area or the actual footprint of these properties?
It's the overall footprint. So I've measured it from the outside of the property.
Okay, so it's the actual footprint. All right, thank you very much. You keep saying you keep maintaining 118 is a 1.5 story, but it is actually 1 story because it hasn't been adapted. It's got the same roof line as 116 at the moment. I think it's got just a Velux I didn't really see it, but I believe it's got some kind of dormer light, not dormer light. It's got a sloping window, hasn't it? I think. It's a Velux window. So, but it's the same. So why are you having to make the roof higher here by quite a considerable amount in order to, but when the existing one actually doesn't have to have that?
So the increase in height is due to the current building regulations, which needs us to essentially push the ridgeline higher. As I mentioned in the earlier part of my speech, we've got a significant amount of permitted development that we can fall back on, but you may have seen from your site visit today that the property itself is in a fairly poor state. There's asbestos and black mold and other bits and pieces going on with the property. And to actually convert it as it is not effective or efficient because of the amount of material we'd have to take out of it to then extend. There's a question there to say, well, how much of the original building would actually be left if we then started delivering on permitted development rights, changing materials as required, so windows and doors, bricks that may have blown, and removing the interior materials as well in terms of roof tiles, plasterboard and so on.
Yeah, but I wasn't asking about why you're retaining the existing building, which is obviously also actually helps ecologically, environmentally to have it keeping, but why it's being actually elevated is the real reason. The thing that I've been asking is why it's significantly higher, but not significantly higher, but higher than the existing building, which makes it out of keeping with its neighbors.
So that comes back to the current building control regulations, which in terms of roof heights have changed from when 118 was able to convert its loft and put a room in the roof effectively.
I mean, I'm looking at the proposed site plan that was put up by Holly. It seems quite large actually compared to this one next to it, and certainly I'm surprised about these measurements. But anyway, I'm sure you're right. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wilson.
Did I understand you to say that the applicant is at the moment living in 118?
That's correct, yes.
Does he actually own 118?
No, they rent 118.
Right. Because it would be logical to develop both of them together if you were trying to get something sensible, because what you've got at the moment is a very peculiar roof line when you're looking at it from the front. It just looks peculiar. And the chimney between them, I assume it's a shared chimney, isn't it? One set of chimneys goes into 118 and one goes into 116. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. Yeah. We did propose a second chimney on our designs as well, but we had to remove that through conversations with the planning department.
Any more questions for Mr. Melville?
Yeah, one more question.
Away you go.
The planning officers have mentioned about hard standing. Is that going to be permeable? Hence, would that be permeable hard standing as opposed to putting a whole lot of water on the road?
That's correct, yes. It would be permeable.
It would be permeable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's it. Thank you. And now we go on to Councillor Lay. No, this is your speaking. You are registered to speak as a ward councillor.
Fine, thank you very much. When you look at Ashley Road, the whole length of Ashley Road. One of the lovely things about Ashley Road is the differences there are between all the dwellings coming from where we come out of Suffolk and into East Cambs. It's one of the loveliest roads that we have within Newmarket, and its characteristics are that of houses that have been built by individual owners and have been developed in one way or another to change the aspect of those properties. And I cannot see any just reason for turning down this application, because what we have at the moment is a building which under all circumstances should be taken down, because it's not fit for habitation. In fact, it's not even fit for habitation of a tramp, let alone the rest of us. So my view is that basically this isn't so out of kilter with the rest of the properties on Ashley Road that we as a committee should turn it down. I think we should agree to this application going forward, and I would propose that we accept this application, because it will replace a property that nobody could live in at the moment.
Point of order, please, Chair.
If your point of order is anything to do with, first of all, would you return to your seat? Do you think that's one thing? Councillor Lay, people are going to ask you questions, so would you go and sit at the table over there, please? Now we are now on.
Point of order, please.
Yes.
Councillor Lay is predetermined and therefore should not carry on with this debate. And also, he proposed something in where he's just meant to be reading a statement. He shouldn't propose.
Of course, you're absolutely correct. So, Councillor Lay, it would appear that you are preconceived on this item. And you should have come up and spoken and then left the room if you were preconceived on it. So,
Chair, I am not preconceived on this. I've had a look at the site, which is in my ward, and having looked at the site on behalf of my ward, I do, like everyone else, when they look at properties on their ward, they realise that the mind can be made up. But as a member of this committee, I have always set out to listen to the views of the members of the committee, and then eventually to have made up my mind in line with the views of the committee.
but you haven't heard the full debate yet, and it would be unreasonable for you to have a view until the debate was finished, and that we were at the stage of you talking as a ward member, and clearly you have a view. And so I believe that what you should do is you have made a statement. I believe you should be open to be questioned by your colleagues, and then I think you should not take part in the voting or the debate.
Chair, I recognise what you've said, and I will act accordingly.
Okay, thank you. So, members, questions for Councillor Lay? Yes, Councillor Trapp.
I mean, one should always ask questions of people coming up to talk before the committee, and you're no exception. Yes, I mean, I take your point that Ashley Road is of various built forms, some looking very nice, some looking not so nice, to be fair to them. but also, but in this part of the road itself, it is actually fairly uniform, not uniform, but the heights and the types of building are very similar. And I think I'm not sure whether one should encourage too much diversity. Where it is in the other part of Ashley Road, I could see that the double-story, two-story houses, and they are different as well, but there's much of a muchness. So I'm not sure. So yeah, how much?
I'm trying to get some order here, and the order is that you're asking questions.
Oh, I was
If you've finished answering questions, your debate period will come later.
I thought someone ought to ask the Councillor Lay a question. So the question is, after all that, how much importance do you put to diversity as opposed to semi-uniformity?
My feeling is that that's just a wide question that could be
Yes, I shall not-
debated for a very
I shall
long
not
time.
take 20
And if you could
minutes.
answer it in a very short way, it would be appreciated.
Look, diversity in an area of a town like that is important. But I can understand where Councillor Trapp is coming from, when he is saying that those 6 properties which lead up to that particular property are quite uniform. Whether or not we as a council want to keep it that way, the vote will be in your hands.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And that's now finished this section of questions to the councillor. So I think it would be appropriate if you left the room while we continue with this agenda item. Thank you for your cooperation. Officers, would you like to make any comments on what you've heard so far?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reiterate that officers are not opposed to the demolition and replacement of the existing dwelling, nor improvements to its visual amenity or the introduction of a 1.5-storey dwelling. The concern that we have regarding the proposal is the additional height and overall design of the property in relation to the one that it will be adjoined to, and the impacts on the character and appearance of the street scene. The application originally came in for a detached dwelling, which was of a greater height than the proposal that is put before you now. Officers were satisfied that the increase in height of the detached dwelling would be acceptable, given that there is some variation in the heights within the street scene. However, under the application as it stands at the moment for a semi-detached property, it is necessary to have a look at the property it would be adjoined to. And in this case, we consider that the additional height, where all the semi-detached properties within that street scene follow a continued roof line, would be harmful to the character and appearance of the street scene. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have questions to be offered from members. There's just straight questions. Please go ahead. Councillor Trapp, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, forget to put my mic on. The planning, you say there is some previous planning history, but in the report under 3, it says no planning history at the site.
There isn't any planning history for the application dwelling, as far as I'm aware.
But you say there was a 1.5 detached house.
Apologies, the detached dwelling that I've referred to is the scheme that was submitted to us initially. The plans that have been presented to you today are the amended scheme, but it's all under the same application. There hasn't been a previous application on this.
Oh, okay, so it was amended with officer input.
Yes, officers raised concern to the scale and design of the detached dwelling and asked for amendments to the scheme. And the amended scheme submitted is for the semi-detached dwelling, which has been presented.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Huffer.
Can you just clarify for me? So you would have approved the detached dwelling, although it was 2-storey or 1.5-storey? I'm not sure if I've got that right.
The height of the dwelling was something that we said could be supported, but it was the overall scale and resultant design of the dwelling that we had concerns regarding.
Any Councillor Wilson.
If the house, 116 had been the same height as 118, but actually had a larger footprint, i.e. it had gone further back into the garden, then that would have been more acceptable, you think?
I don't think officers are opposed to an increase in the footprint of the dwelling, but I think it is the additional height and overall design that we have concerns regarding.
Any more questions for the officer? Councillor Trapp, you've got your light on. So if there's none of that, we now go into debate. Members. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I feel sorry for the applicant because obviously the dwelling there at the moment is not fit to live in, and it does require upgrading. However, the upgrade should suit this and support the surrounding dwellings as well. So I am in agreement with the officers and that this, and would like to propose that this should be refused unless, you know, the amendments can be made.
So you're proposing that you agree with the officer's recommendation to refuse. Okay, I made a note of that and we'll continue. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second that. We're supporting the officer's recommendation. I think it isn't so much what has been put in. It's not. It just looks so horrible because it's spoiled the whole view. It isn't that it's different. You know, difference is okay, but you know, if the thing with the funny lumps in it just makes the whole street scene look peculiar. So a better designed building, preferably a bungalow, which is, or you know, a same height as many of the other dwellings there, would be much better, even if it had been bigger. And therefore, I think the officer is quite right to say that we want to have a good quality building on here, and we don't want peculiar lumps and bumps on the thing, just making the place look untidy.
Councillor Huffer.
I'm in complete agreement with councillors Goodall and Wilson. I just think this would look like a cut and shut. It just would not look right from the street scene. And I see that the owners of 118 are also in opposition to this proposal, saying that their extension, which they did some 30 years ago, means that this enlarged dwelling would actually overshadow their living room, which would be unacceptable. So I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Now we are currently in the debate section. We have a proposer, we have a seconder. Have we got any more? We have. You're looking as though you disagree with that comment.
No.
Oh, right. Councillor Trapp.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, I think it's a pity. I mean, I think we shouldn't be judging about who's going to live in it or why it's needed, but we should be judging it on its appearance. And I must say, I do think the extra roof height is not making it attractive at all. It's a very north of this road. It's a very attractive countryside, and I think it would be a pity that we have something which I think is certainly is not in keeping with what's there already. And I really think that the roof line is too high.
Thank you. We are on the debate. If there's any more members to speak, I would like to say that during the course of this application, it's been said that there's various different types of houses along this road. Well, there's a big difference in my mind between somewhere along the road having a variety of architectural styles and actually bolted onto the side. And I think, therefore, if you've got a semi-detached house, there's an absolute obligation to have the height identical, as opposed to if it was a detached house, the next one down the line, it could be a little bit shorter or taller, and it would be variance that could be welcomed, but not when it's up alongside. And so we have had from councillor Goodall and councillor Wilson a proposal and a seconder. And I intend, unless anybody's got anything else to say, I intend to go to the vote now. So those in favour of adopting the officer's recommendation and refusing this application for the reasons given by the officer, which is proposed by councillor Goodall and seconded by councillor Wilson, please raise their hands.
Yeah.
Was that unanimous?
Yeah.
So that's unanimous. So it has been, the application has been refused. I'm conscious of your situation regarding the time you've spent on this earth, and I wouldn't like you to be missing out on any of life's experiences.
Who else has been thrown out?
I'm aware when we get to that next speaker that that light's not working when I press this, so they're not changing, they're not even coming on.
Well, we'll just leave that. I can look over and see how many
Yeah.
minutes it's got.
So that you're aware. Don't know why.
Okay, let's just, we're still in session, councillors. And can we have the officer's presentation, please, on item number 6?
Good afternoon, members. So agenda item 6 concerns outline plan application for the erection of up to 83 affordable homes with associated access, parking and landscaping. All matters are reserved apart from means of access. 2 elements of housekeeping before I go on to the rest of my presentation. At paragraph 7.4 of my report, I state that the previous application was dismissed at appeal. That is not correct. That should be allowed. Another correction I would like to note, 7.13 of my report, is that I've stated that there are 75 individuals within Streatham and Little Thetford. That should read as households. I will just clarify that neither of those 2 points affect the recommendation made to you today. The application has been referred to committee given that it concerns an outline planning application for over 50 dwellings in accordance with the council's constitution. Just showing you on the screen the red line location plan. So you will note, and I'm sure many are familiar with the SR garage, which is just to the northeast, and there are kennels further down. The application site is a large agricultural field. And an aerial view. This is an indicative layout, just to clarify. And then a more in-depth proposal shown on the screen there, showing the proposed SUDs to the drainage scheme, as well as community orchard and on-site open and play space, as well as there are also off-site mitigation works, which I will go on to next. Again, just to clarify, this is an indicative layout. The only matter reserved is access at this stage. And on the screen there are the proposed on and off-site highway works, which includes footpath improvements to the western side of Cambridge Road, as well as junction radio works to Short Road, just beyond the SR garage, a refuge island across the A10 with tactile paving, as well as the access onto the development itself. To provide members with a planning history overview for the application site, I have shown on the screen the illustrative layouts for the previous applications within the site. One in 2022, that scheme was refused by the council and then allowed at appeal for 19 dwellings, 100% affordable. Then the scheme for 38 in the centre was under delegated authority. It was approved in the latter end of last year for 38 100% affordable dwellings, and then the current scheme is shown on the far right. Some site photos for you on the screen, showing looking towards Streatham.
a close-up view with the recently refurbished number 44 Cambridge Road to the right, and to the left, the white dwelling is number 45 Cambridge Road. And here is a viewpoint taken from the landscape visual impact assessment submitted with the application. This is along the Wilburton Road, the A1123, and that is viewpoint 9. On the screen, the main planning considerations are set out, and I shall go through these now. With regards to the principle of the development, the application site is fully outside of the defined development envelope. It nevertheless comprises a 100% affordable housing rural exception site, for which there is a policy within the local plan, policy HAL 4, for up to 83 units. There is identified need for affordable housing in Streatham and Little Thetford. It is proposed to serve those 2 villages. It is on this basis, and for the reasons set out in detail in my report, that proposal is considered to comply with the objectives of policy HAL 4, which itself is an exception to growth 2. And to confirm there will be contributions, the applicant has agreed heads of terms regarding contributions to education and libraries, as well as other matters set out in my report. With regards to highways, it is worth clarifying that the on and off-site highway scheme is the exact same scheme approved under the 2 previous approvals, the one allowed at appeal as well as the one approved in delegated authority. The County Council's Local Highways Authority, as well as the County Council's Transport Assessment Team, have raised no objections in terms of highway safety or sustainability, so there are therefore no technical objections to this. Whilst indicative, the applicant has provided sufficient evidence to demonstrate that sufficient on-site parking in accordance with the Council's local plan, policy COM 8, would be achievable. With regards to indicative layout and visual amenity, on the screen there I've just taken an extract from the landscape visual impact assessment submitted by the applicant. This is including all of the viewpoints. On the left is the closer views, and then on the right is the wider views, including a zone of theoretical visibility. It is worth noting that during the construction and completion stages, so if we take that as year 1 of the development or year 0 of the development, there would be adverse landscape impacts, albeit these do diminish very quickly with distance from the site and also over time. There is mitigative planting proposed on the southern and western boundaries, and ultimately with the establishment of this planting over the 15-year period, after which the impacts are considered to be permanent. At a local, national and county scale, the overall visual impacts of the development upon the character and the landscape are considered to be negligible. And I've just taken some further extracts here from the landscape visual impact assessment, viewpoints 1, 2 and 3, which are predominantly mainly of the site frontage, and the immediate views along Cambridge Road are the worst affected in terms of landscape visual, in terms of the short term. And then just to provide members with a view, which I appreciate you would have seen from the committee bus today, is viewpoint 13, which is further south on the A10. Matters of residential amenity, and this was a matter very much kind of addressed under the previous appeal decision, which allowed the 19 homes. Members will note that the site, both in terms of character and noise, is dominated by the A10 and the vehicular traffic associated with it. As you will see on the right, there is an extract from the noise impact assessment, which is showing a large portion of the site, to put it simply, in unacceptable noise levels, which go above commonly accepted standards. What has been established under the previous appeal is the use of mechanical ventilation and heat recovery systems. Effectively, this would enable comfortable internal living standards with closed windows. The previous inspector imposed the condition upon the scheme for 19 homes, and this was carried over to the scheme for 38, which required the developments were constructed to passive house standards or in passive house principles. To confirm this wouldn't mean that the dwellings were passive house certified, but it would mean that they would operate at very high sustainability and very thermally efficient. And it is considered that applying the same principles to this development would result in acceptable level of a residential amenity, as well as the other mitigation measures in terms of close board fencing within the garden areas to ensure outdoor amenity levels were also within acceptable limits. It is also worth noting that from plots 55 to 83, albeit indicative at this stage, would actually benefit from more normal levels of residential amenity in terms of they would not have to rely solely on mechanical ventilation internally. So it's on this basis and with the imposition of the same condition that it's found to be acceptable in terms of residential amenity. To also clarify that the development is considered to be acceptable in all other technical respects. And I will note specifically, as it was evident on site today, that whilst there is a degree of surface water flooding, I'd like to confirm that the lead local flood authority do not have any objections and a workable scheme has been put forward to address the surface water flooding. In terms of an overall summary, this is shown on the screen, the scheme would achieve significant benefits in bringing forward a wholly affordable housing scheme to meet what is considered to be a robustly evidenced locally identified need, which is the key component of policy House 4 and Growth 2. It would also contribute to a district-wide need for affordable housing, and the dwellings themselves would be built to highly sustainable levels. And there are many other factors, and I will not go through all of them now as they are set out within my report, which has ultimately resulted in a substantial weight being afforded to the development proposals and a recommendation of approval subject to the following terms as set out at paragraph 1.1 of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We now have Laura O'Brien on behalf of the applicant. You've got 5 minutes and please make sure you turn the microphone on.
Hello, members of the planning committee. My name is Laura O'Brien and I represent part of the agent team for the application. The application before you seeks approval for 83 affordable homes and follows a previous approval for 38 similar homes on broadly the same sites. The scheme is brought forward in association with Stonewater Housing Group, a registered affordable housing provider who will be developing out the sites. The scheme is being developed in consultation with the council's planning and housing officers in order to achieve the best mix of affordable housing tenures to meet local housing needs informed by both the council's housing register and the local housing needs survey specifically undertaken for the villages of Stratham and Little Tepford. The development will be entirely affordable, but will incorporate a mix of tenures to meet demand. This will comprise 42 rented homes, 16 shared ownership homes, and 25 rent-to-buy homes. The demand for rent-to-buy tenure was specifically identified by the local housing needs survey, providing a pathway to home ownership by giving a 20% discounted rent to allow residents to save for a deposit with an option to buy their home outright or a shared ownership within 5 years. The proposed mix of tenures, including shared and full home ownership, will ensure that development promotes social cohesion and provides housing options for a wide range of local people. The officer's report sets out in detail the clear and significant need for affordable housing in the borough and more generally in the parish of Stratham specifically. As part of Stonewater's commitment to building sustainable homes for the future within the development will be constructed following passive house principles, as previously mentioned, to provide highly energy efficient homes that will in turn provide low energy and water costs for future residents. We note that there are no objections to the proposal from statutory consultees, including the Highways Authority and the lead local flood authority. Furthermore, the application has received significant support from local residents, including 70 comments from people who wish to support affordable housing in the area. In addition, still contributions to the applications are already agreed to make substantial 106 contributions towards education, libraries, and open space enhancements. To conclude, we believe that this is an excellent scheme and we trust that you'll follow your officer's recommendations and approve. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just stay there, members may have questions. Councillor Huffer.
I'm not sure if this is a question or just what I want to say in debate. I'm not quite sure why any development thinks it's okay for upwards, I think, is it 30 or 40 houses to have mechanical ventilation rather than to be able to open their windows because the
I
noise.
think in fairness, this is a debate item.
Is
I
this a
don't-
debate item? Can I go on to, are
Well,
you?
you can ask the
Okay,
applicant
well, I'm
question.
asking why she thinks it's acceptable.
I mean,
to
it
have
has been
mechanical
previously,
ventilation.
the ventilation strategy has been previously approved, so it is considered acceptable.
I'm asking why you think it's acceptable.
I mean, I'm not an engineer in that space, so I
But-
can't specifically answer the
but you're
engineering
asking-
questions.
But your organisation is asking people to live in houses where they can't open their windows.
I mean, it has been previously approved to be appropriate living standards and everything is up to spec and it is
Okay.
considered to be a reasonable outcome for future
And,
residents.
and can I ask, from these affordable houses, sorry, Chair, how people are going to cross that road to get to schools, to get to the doctors, to get to the shops? Because unless you're an Olympic sprinter at some times of the day, you're never going to be able to cross that road. I know there's an island there,
Mhm.
but if you're a mother with a buggy and a small child with a scooter, you've still got to try and get to the middle of that. That is absolutely extraordinary that nobody, including highways and your organisation, haven't thought about a safe way to get people from one side of the road to the village where they will get all their amenities. And I cannot support any application, I don't care what the inspector says, that means that residents have got to take their lives in their hand to try and cross the road to get to school. Sorry, Chair.
Well, I think when it comes to debate, you'll probably be able to take a little bit less time. Thank you. Now,
What they're proposing to make this crossing this road, the A10, safe for residents.
Councillor Huffer, we haven't heard all the facts yet. So, any more members want to ask questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Who is going to be managing these affordable housing? And I'm not quite sure, does the rent to buy one mean that after 5 years, they're actually owner occupied houses and not affordable housing at all?
To be honest, I have to revert to some of the affordable housing schemes because I'm not the primary agent on this one at the moment. So I'll just grab my laptop and double check for you. The primary agent who's been looking after this actually broken his some bones, so he's kind of not available today. So I'm just representing.
Excuse me one
That's
second.
fine.
Would you prefer us to answer it? Because we can probably answer that question.
Sure, thank you.
If you can answer that question, it would
Yeah,
be.
so as part of section 106, there is a clause that keeps the properties even when they are being purchased at a percentage below market value. So they are retained as affordable dwellings. So whilst they may be owner occupied, so think about it like when people are laddering up when they buy 20% up, it's still kept a percentage below market rating. So when they then put it on the market.
I
they
think
will
we can
sell.
assume that
It's
members know what affordable housing is, and if they don't, then they could perhaps have a chat with the planning manager at a later date. Because we know what
Sure.
Affordable housing are. Councillor Trapp.
I thought we were going to be told who is managing the property. Is it a registered housing association?
Yeah, the housing.
If you've got an answer, that would be great.
Housing Association, Stonewater.
It's which we.
They're called Stonewater.
Go on. Thank you.
Councillor Lay.
I think my question has been answered. Thank you.
I beg your pardon, I'm getting people talking to me from different areas. I had on my list here, there's no one on my list now, but I'll put Councillor Trapp on because I can assume he would be.
I did actually put up my pencil. Thank you very much for the corroboration. Two things. I mean, first of all, passive house standard, terrific, absolutely wonderful. And I'm actually trying to design a passive house as well, so I'm wearing with you. So will it have the insulation of a passive house?
My understanding, I can revert and get some additional information for you, is that it will be up to passive house standards and that will include insulation.
Okay, so basically, if it is up to passive house standard, you probably won't need any heating whatsoever.
Yeah.
My own calculations show that I'll need 200 watts when it's -5 outside, 20 inside. So basically, there's a lot of saving there on heat.
Exactly,
And also
yeah.
the environment. Thank you very much.
And water as well.
Yeah. Water?
It would just give them lower bills in general of different,
Okay.
like energy and things like that.
All right. The other, great. So that is really cutting down. The other thing, and actually it is possible, the reason when one has to open windows in the conventional houses because there's no air circulation.
Exactly, yeah.
And that is the reason. I think the conditions of the renting or buying, whatever it is, are quite important. And for instance, we had a scheme here 1 month ago where if the property someone was selling, it will be back to it will still be kept as affordable. Is that the contention? Is
Yeah.
that the thing? So it will still be in perpetuity.
Yeah, the stock won't be lost.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we might come to that later. And the other one is, I take Councillor Huffer's point about the access, and I'm not sure about, I don't know Stratham well enough. I passed by it, but that is all I see. Are all the shops and schools on the eastern side of the A10? They are. Is there a possibility of putting something like a tunnel underneath? Bridge is quite high, tunnel is much easier. Actually.
I don't think it's ever been thought of, to be honest. So I'd
Because
to speak with highways on that.
A road which is dangerous. And I think in the morning, I doubt anyone can cross it. I really, the south, people going south, traveling south, there'll be a continuous flow of cars from this area. So I think I'm not sure about the planning, but it might just be, particularly for 83 dwellings, I could see for 19 dwellings, maybe, one can run across, but 83 dwellings, I think is going to be quite a lot of, it's going to be very chancy, that road. That was a question.
Chair, my question's for the officers later on. Thank you.
Sure.
I've got a question. And that question is, if you're going to build it to passive house standards, why aren't you getting all the certification and the recommendation? So we could say, here it is, they're passed, but to say, if you are going to bring it to all those standards and comply with everything, why haven't you gone that last little step to reassure people by getting the certification? That's my question.
I think the officers have.
Sorry, if I'm happy to go through you, Chair, and provide a position on that regarding the certification. It's incredibly expensive.
But how are we going to, how are we going to check? How are you going to have the certificates? How are you going to have the evidence? Because just by saying we're going to do it is not valid until you've got the certificate or the form there.
Before we move on to it.
No, my question was, if you're going to comply, why aren't you doing the certification?
The condition imposed by the planning inspectorate was a passive house principles. So when they've not been required to deliver the scheme in accordance with passive house standards, therefore there was never an expectation they'd have to certify it.
Okay, so the answer is clearly that it's not actually required to have the certification.
Correct. but it will be to standards.
I think members will read what they want into that. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I know one of my colleagues suggested a tunnel or a bridge, but in fact, the simplest way and the cheapest way of allowing people to cross the road would be a crossing with the traffic lights, because that would be the only way that you'd actually get people to actually stop and make sure you could cross. So that's not a fiendishly expensive thing, and I think that ought to be part of the development, because 83 houses ought to justify a proper crossing of that road, a very, very fast road.
I think
Especially traffic traveling from the roundabout back down. And the other thing about the entrance is that if you're going to come out there in a car and turn right on that road, well, I wouldn't want to do it. I think you'd have to have a left turn only and up to the roundabout and back again, which is again not very easy, because that roundabout is often completely blocked. I
can help you a little bit and say that a tunnel would be certainly north of £2 million. The pedestrian crossing in Hadnam about 5 years ago was far in excess of £100,000, and it's not in the application as we sit here, and we're not in the application that we're judging. It's not being suggested.
I'd just like to, sorry.
I'm asking members now, are there any more questions you'd like to ask the applicant? Councillor Wilson.
Is there a play area on this site? Because I couldn't see it on there, and young children will need a play area on this site because they're
so there's a play area on the indicative plan towards the front of the site, the frontage of the site.
Oh, and that's got equipment and things, play equipment on it, has it?
Yes, and then there will also be a community orchard, which is on the kind of southern boundary.
I see. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much indeed. If everybody's asked the questions they want. Yes.
I think it's just also, I'm not sure if
there's a red light on there, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's fine. You can go back and sit down now. Thank you. And the officer, would you like to now make any comments?
Thank you, Chair.
As a result of what you've heard.
Just a couple. To clarify, it's our outline application with all matters reserved barring access. So the only details we have are access at the moment. Whilst we do have indicative plans to aid assessment, nothing has been fixed in terms of layout, in terms of open space. So just to clarify, we've already touched briefly on the passive house principles. To confirm again, it's passive house principles that the previous schemes were required to be built in accordance with, and that would be seen either within any reserve matters submission or as a condition, a further condition. So that is why certification has not been included in that condition. And just to clarify on the transport matters regarding the crossing and the refuge, as you note, I will draw your attention back to the comments of the Local Highways Authority and the County Council Transport Assessment Team. We do not have any technical objections from statutory consultees on this scheme. The development is considered to mitigate its own impacts. That is all it is required to do as part of this application, and it is not required to fix existing problems. With regards to the matters of things such as traffic lights, again, that has not been proposed here, but also consideration must be given to the other implications of infrastructure such as that, ultimately transport impacts and trip impacts regarding impacts on the roundabout as well, with regards to stopping traffic. So to reiterate quite strongly the comments of the statutory consultees regarding the transport. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lay, I think you may have been first.
Thank you. I have really two questions really to ask really. That's regarding the passive certificates. You'll probably know in planning that we turned down an application quite recently in Soham for a property that was going to be built to passive conditions, but the applicant wouldn't build it so that it was certified passive. So why in planning would we agree now not to enforce certificates to be produced for the passive housing? And the second part of my question, or do you want to answer the first
Please,
part
If
first?
you don't mind, I'll try and
Certainly.
I'll try and answer the first one. What we've got here is when the first application came in for 19 homes, the council, as you'll see from the report, refused it on 3 elements. Most notably, quite frankly, was noise and living conditions. That went to appeal. Bearing in mind, this was at the frontage of the site, so these are going to be the worst affected of all the dwellings. The inspectorate looked at it and concluded that should the dwellings meet passive house standards, and the inspectorate were not willing to go as far as to say certification, then they would provide an acceptable level of amenity for ongoing occupiers. So this isn't a East Cambridgeshire decision that this is all okay. It is we have resisted it. It went to appeal, but it's then come back, and that is now a very significant material consideration. So bearing in mind, and just to build the picture here, we've got that permission, then we've got a permission now for 38 dwellings. So what you'd need to determine is, bearing in mind the additional dwellings are further back into the site, whether or not those standards are sufficient for those additional dwellings, bearing in mind the ones at the frontage of the site have already, quite frankly, been granted planning permission, and that horse has somewhat bolted in planning terms. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you. The second question was, we have 42 dwellings on site which are going to be rented. And I think it's good that a site like this is affordable housing, because we can do with an awful lot more. So these 42 rental properties, how can we ensure that they only go to people that are on our 1,000 housing list within the local authority?
Thank you. So as part of the heads of terms, as agreed with the applicant, there would be a cascade principle applied in the legal agreement, which is yet to be drafted, but the heads of terms are sufficient for now in terms of going to local priorities first, and then only after a certain amount of time would it then go wider out to wider parishes and then wider out to the district as a whole. So the applicant has confirmed they are happy to accept that within the wording of the legal agreement to ensure that it is local priority, and only after X number of attempts and going through different cascades, different levels, would it then potentially go slightly further out.
Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, and it's about access and highways. We couldn't cross that road this morning and we were off peak. How do you expect someone to cross that road when the peak traffic is going and the school run is going? And I know it's highways, and my question is, have you screwed down with highways about their application, and why aren't they here to answer our questions?
Thank you, councillor. The simple answer is, when the first application came in, obviously we would have gone out to highways. They came back with no objection. Obviously we refused it. The inspector will have looked at the junction at that point as well, and he considered that there were no highways implications. We are not, as officers, as you're well aware, we are not technical experts when it comes to highways. We will have our concerns. I'll leave it at that. The officer has been back to highways and has asked them the questions, are you sure? Which I think is a reasonable question to ask, bearing in mind we're increasing the number of vehicles going onto the site. And we've gone that both the highways teams, and both of those highways teams have given us no objections. So at the moment, as officers, we have no technical highways objections to that site. So we are not in a position to, but bearing in mind, we also do have, let's be honest here, we've got 2 permissions which have been granted with exactly the same highways layout. So if members were concerned about the highways layout, it would need to be on the difference between 38 dwellings and 83, because as I've just alluded to with regards to the passive house, most of this has already been granted planning permission and therefore has significant weight. Thank you.
Yes, please do.
That's fine, but them other 2 applications didn't come before this committee because of the numbers of houses for being developed. It's come to this committee now. we find that that road is unsafe for them people to get across. Now, this is us as a committee, so I would like to propose that we postpone giving an answer on this until we can talk to the highways at this committee and question their decisions.
At the moment, that's a question to two officers. Yes. So we'll leave that, but we won't forget about it. We'll get Councillor Trapp to ask. Hold on.
If I may, Chair, whilst we're on that subject, we cannot force county to come to this meeting.
I'm fully aware of that.
However much
and I'm fully aware of the weight we should put behind these things, where 12 elected members or 10 elected members want something, and people won't travel from 15 miles or Cambridge or 30 to come here.
A further consideration on this could be, and it's only a thought to members for yourselves to deliberate and consider, could be going out to a third party to get an independent traffic assessment.
Members will debate that, no doubt, in a few minutes' time. Councillor Trapp.
I have a number of questions. So I'm just getting a little bit earache on my left side here. What I was going to ask to say, I think it was at Wentworth we had the development last month of affordable housing.
Little Downham.
Little Downham, sorry, it's somewhere north of the district. I don't really understand that much. I thought the conditions on the affordability and the continuation of the affordability worked very well for that development, and I'm sure that I hope that we can have this very similar conditions.
The principles with regards to the cascade are exactly the same.
Thank you very much. The other thing, we're talking about passive house. There's two aspects of a passive house. One is the mechanical ventilation heat recovery. The other one is the insulation. So as far as one can see from the inspector's report, or what the inspector said in the appeal, is that one wanted the mechanical ventilation part of it. Are we actually, what I've seemed to have got, sorry, I've forgotten your name from the agent, that there'll also be the condition on that it will be highly insulated as well. Can we put that down as a condition?
Can I draw members' attention to condition 18 on page 82? And the condition reads, the detailed design of a dwelling is hereby permitted shall incorporate the 5 principles of passive house design as set out within spit garble. We'll get that changed, but as set out within the submitted energy and sustainable strategy.
Right, well, I haven't seen the 5 principles, so that will be. And just to reassure members, perhaps, that passive house certification is quite onerous and expensive, and maybe that is why the housing development is not adding, and it is in I think somewhere around 10,000 minimum will be for a house. Is the cost of it, let alone the actual conditions. I am concerned about the access. And I think, sorry, well, we'll debate this, but I think we might have to actually defer this until we get, but I think the conditions we were very poor for people living on that. But I think we have to discuss that.
Councillor Lay, this is questions to the officers.
Exactly. I just wondered whether or not, if we're going to put conditions in with this application, if it is approved, that we could put the costing in for putting a crossing in, irrespective of whether or not the county council wants a crossing at this point, whether or not we could put the costing of a crossing as a condition of this application.
I'm not entirely sure how you word a condition about the costing or something. to be perfectly honest, it's either necessary or it's not. For it to meet the tests of the circular to be an acceptable condition, it needs to be enforceable.
And the
reasonably
highway
required,
engineers,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, we would either need some sort of report or our highways people telling us that it is required. Yeah, the other thing is, bearing in mind, is anything that goes onto the highways will require a section 278 and highways own agreement. If they don't want it, it ain't going to be going on there. So we need to be very careful about the approach that we take.
I will just interrupt. I was involved with a pedestrian crossing in Hadnam, and it was the devil's own job to get first of all, the officers there, and secondly, to agree on a position where it could be installed and the specification. And it was another year, I would say, at least to get some suggestion then. And then it wasn't in the place where the local people wanted it. So it's not that simple. It's not a matter of just the money, it's the whole paraphernalia and bureaucracy. Councillor Wilson and I cooperated on that, and it's not something, and it's not in our application. Now, we've got any more questions for the officers? No, and in which case we move on to debate, and away we go. Councillor Huffer.
I would like to second the proposal made by Councillor Goodall that we defer this item and we obtain an independent traffic survey to work out what the impact would be on 83 dwellings, a potential 160 cars minimum entering onto that road, pedestrians trying to cross that road to access schools, shops and medical services before I say yay or nay to anything that is going to put residents' life at harm. I'd just like to say, some members will remember the application in Fordham for a co-op in the Chequers car park. The Highways Authority had absolutely no issue with it. There is not an issue with it. Put the car park there, put the co-op there. There will be no issues. This is a slow, a standard B road. There's not a high volume of traffic. Not an issue. Within 6 months, an elderly gentleman was killed trying to cross the road to get to the co-op. So the parish council put in an application for a crossing. It was refused on the grounds it failed the safety audit because the traffic comes around that corner too fast and in too high a volume. So the Highways Authority, frankly, let this committee down time after time after time. They never leave their offices. They look at these things on their desks. They never stand by the side of the road at 9:15 in the morning when a mother would be trying to get her children to school and trying to cross that road. How many people have to die before the highways authorities and the planning inspectorate start to do their jobs and listen to local people about safety concerns on our highways? I'm fully supportive of affordable housing, but why do they have to be treated like second-class citizens, asked to take their lives in their hand, crossing the road to reach basic amenities, to live in houses that are so close to the road, a busy potentially dual carriageway with high volume of traffic so they can't even open their windows to enjoy fresh air, to put the children's playing ground within 5 yards of the A10 and think that's okay? Well, these are people. They need to be treated with respect and consideration and care. And any application that thinks that this is okay, I'm sorry, I could not support in any way.
Okay, we
So
are
I'm
now.
happy to potentially defer.
We take your comments there. I would just make a comment to say if you defer to a third party, you're only doing that on one issue, and it may well be that other members may have other issues they're unhappy with. And there may not just be the one issue, which I agree is important. We've got Councillor Whelan.
My experience of actually driving through Streatham and that part of the A10 is on basically at least 3 days a week, both ways. The traffic there is busy, it is fast. It's supposed to be a 40-mile-an-hour limit through that part of Streatham. When people come off the roundabout, they put their foot down. They are going, basically, before they reach the national speed limit, they are going up to 60, 50, 60 miles an hour down that stretch of road. To have that many people coming out of a junction on there is highly dangerous. There is going to be a major traffic collision there. There are traffic collisions down that road as it is, further down there, because of people's driving and not abiding by speed limits and overtaking. The queues up to the roundabout are horrendous. And at the times of day, lots of times of day, even in the mornings. And I just feel from a safety point of view of pedestrians walking to school, crossing that road, just being out there today, standing on the side of the road, the noise level, the speed of the traffic in a supposedly 40-mile-an-hour area, there's no way those lorries and those other cars were going, and that's at 40. I just feel the whole entrance there is dangerous, and I would personally refuse that application on those grounds.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Whelan. We are now in the debate section, so I've kept my opinions to myself. We've got one more after me, but we'll have some more. I feel very emotional about this application. I feel that when I was elected 20 years ago, my mother asked me and said, "What are you really trying to do?" And I said, "I'm going to try and stop bad things happening to the area I represent and try and make good things happening." Now, I cannot, having stood just as a final thing, but this morning on the side of that road, I cannot expose what will be 200 people living in 83 houses to the danger of crossing that road. And therefore, I will be voting against it. I find it is just unacceptable. You can't get out of that bus, stand at the side of that road and do anything that promotes exposing members of the public to those things. And where Councillor Whelan said it, I venture to suggest I'm considerably older than she is. And I've been driving that road because I'm a Wilburton boy, and everything she says is absolutely true and correct. And there's no exaggeration of what she said. I believe that it's damaging to the character of the area. I think a huge, great expanse of buildings on the left as you come from Cambridge will just ruin the character of the area, hurtful to the views of the open countryside. And I go back to a time when I fought the Meerham proposition, and one of the reasons the inspector turned that down was because of the countryside, which was on the left-hand side of the A10 as you came across the river, and that's what will be ruined today. And that was valid by an inspector after a very, very long battle that the Meerham was. I think the fact that you may have passive houses or not, but anybody in a garden or walking along there, the noise and the fumes, I think is just something very special. We had difficulty, and I suspect we were illegally parked when the bus was parked. We were parked in someone's driveway. There's nowhere, goodness knows where people are going to pick children up to go to school. I don't know. There is, and to clarify it, there is all the commercial activity, and the pub and the church and the chapel and the doctor's surgery, hopefully soon to be, are all on the other side of that road. The playing fields and whatever. I don't understand, it's been explained to me, but I don't understand why we're comparing the housing need and adding Little Thetford. I just don't see why that's being added. Wilburton's actually nearer. And so what is that doing? So we're going to have an oversupply. If we did say yes, we'd have an oversupply of housing. Because, you know, if you take the Little Thetford ones off the Streatham ones, it comes down considerably. I don't understand that. They've got permission for 38 already, and I think it's just too far. And I think it's an overdevelopment as well. And so I think it's absolutely, I have no option if I'm to look at the people who I represent to say I voted against it. And I must do that. That's my conscience. Councillor Trout.
Thank you. Hard act to follow that. There are three, I think, different areas here, the three different strands. One is the access. One is the provision of affordable housing and substantial affordable housing. And the other one is the indicative layout. And let's take them in, not in turn, but in terms of the first one, what I'd like to look at is the fact that it's affordable housing and 83. 38 dwellings have been approved. As far as I'm concerned, for this site, having 83 or 100 doesn't matter. It is affordable housing built to, I think, a high standard. The only problem is the access. So one thing is, and there is a demonstrative need in this district, let alone in Streatham and Wilburton and, dare I say, Little Thetford. I'm not sure where Little Thetford is. I think it's somewhere slightly to the north of this place. So the fact that we're trying to build this with those kind of conditions is, I think, remarkably good. It's excellent. I am talking. I'm not sure about the indicative layout. I think as Councillor Huffer, and I agree with her here, having the play area so near the road, I would put a pond, one of the ponds there, and move the play area somewhere towards the middle. Not the middle, where one of the ponds was. It could also be a swimming pool at the same time, I suppose. But I think that there are issues there about the actual layout once we get to the site. I'm not so concerned about the visual aspect. I think we looked at it coming through, and it is, I mean, we're getting into Streatham, and there's houses on either side, so I don't think it actually spoils the view at all there. I am concerned, though, about the third one, which is the access. And I can see if someone wants to turn right onto that road in the morning, they're going to be there for half an hour, I think, if you're lucky, if they're lucky. So there's something about access. And we know from previous applications that highways don't get it right. They do actually think, oh yeah, that's fine. They do not go out and measure. So certainly, but there is, I noticed, indicative proposed highway works. So there is going to be a refuge island that is going to be there. It's something that has to be built. The road might have to be widened to produce that refuge island. I do not see why one can't have lights there at the same time. You're already building a refuge island there. Why not? We cannot be putting in a traffic lights there as well. I know, and therefore that's why I approve the whole plan, not quite all what the indicative thing, but except for the fact that I think it'll be absolute hell to live there. But with a decent actual way of crossing that road, we would actually have a very good scheme. So I'd like to hear what other people say.
We're still on debate, and other members have got anything they'd like to say. Round.
It's been there for a while. Thank you, Chair. I'll be relatively brief. And I will be totally supporting the proposal that we defer to get a third-party assessment, because even just thinking about a refuge island, one that was big enough to cope with 19 houses is now supposed to be big enough to cope with 83. I find it very hard to believe. I find the other bits, if that was all that was needed to cope with 19 houses, why isn't more needed to cope with 83? It just doesn't make logical sense to me. So I will definitely be supporting the deferral call.
Do you know, this morning, whilst we were standing looking at the site, there were lorries coming towards us, and I moved towards Martin and actually moved him back from the pavement. You know, at that point, it doesn't just look difficult and dangerous to cross the road. It's difficult and dangerous to walk down that path with those lorries coming towards you. It isn't safe. I can't support this application. I was concerned, really concerned for you this morning, because I thought you were standing far too, and you know, a mother with a pram and with a small child are vulnerable immediately they're on that path, let alone crossing the road. So it's not a suitable site unless you can do something drastically different with the road, and that would be too expensive to contemplate. So my view is that I will vote against this application.
Thank. If I'd like to join in the debate, if you were aware, and I'm sure Councillor Whelan is, of the width and of the road in that position, there's talk about a central island is just going to be where two people can stand. There is no way of widening the road because it goes into lay-bys and bus stops. So any refuge island might be suitable for one or two people, but certainly would not be suitable for people with assisted electric chairs or buggies. They would not be suitable. And if you look at there are already there, and they would have no strength, they would be dangerous, and I can't do it. I think the way we've got Councillor Brown, who's in favour of deferring the decision on this, and I've made a note of you, Councillor Trapp. Yes, I've got.
No, Councillor Goodall proposed it originally.
This is the deferral.
Yeah.
The deferral, I believe, will have only one focus, and there are many other focuses that you may want to have. And so I think it may well be that we'll be considering two proposals, one which is deferring and one which is saying no. We may even have one saying yes, totally approve it. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. The reason for the deferral, if we actually say no at this stage and it goes to appeal and we lose, we have no grounds and it's still unsafe. If we go to a referral and get the highways up here, then we make them culpable for if something does go wrong and it goes through.
I see that. However, I believe that things like the character of the area, the views of the area are all other items that should be considered. I think the idea of talking about, unless you know that road, which not every councillor here does seem to know, it's not going to work. And there have been serious accidents on that road. And I believe that if something is wrong, this is my view, you will take your own view. I believe something is wrong, I will not support it.
100% agree with you, Chair, 100%. But unfortunately, I have absolutely no faith in the planning inspectorate. They've already overturned us. They've already said, no, it's okay, carry on. Admittedly, it was only 19 affordable homes at that point. But I still have no faith in the planning inspectorate coming to their senses and doing the right thing unless we provide them with evidence to say how unsafe the impact of 38 homes and 83 homes are to that road. I mean, look what they did in Fordham. Somebody had to die in Fordham and they still got it wrong. You know, they wouldn't listen to locals. They didn't listen to this committee. A planning inspector from Bristol turned up and said, no, it'll be fine. Within 6 months, somebody was dead.
I believe the way forward, and the planning manager will tell me if I'm ill-advised, is that we have a proposal which is based on Councillor Goodall's and your points of view about deferring. For a matter of conscience, I'm going to propose that we reject it because I can't vote in favour or in any way support of this scheme. And then we'll just take a vote and see how we get on with it. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, we know that a bit further up this same road, people in Little Thetford had a terrible job getting anything done at all on that road because the whole village had to cross the A10 to get in and out, didn't it? And we know that they had a great campaign and eventually managed to get the speed limit reduced to 40, which is a little bit better than 60, but you know, is not by any means perfect even now. So the only way to stop traffic so that you can cross the road is a traffic lights. There isn't any other way of stopping the traffic. And the traffic lights ought not to be on the place where they're suggesting an island, which I agree with you, an island is a waste of time. It ought to be at the junction of the road. So, so that the traffic has to stop and let traffic out of it, because the traffic coming out of the road is just as dangerous, particularly if you're going to turn right. So I totally agree. This road is a very, very dangerous road, and that we've had trouble along there for a long while. I mean, as you know, I live just a little bit further up in Haddenham, and we have the same sort of problems with traffic. And in fact, this is worse than Little Downham because it's got all the A1123 traffic coming on it as well. So we need to do something about the traffic on this, irrespective whether highways think it's okay. So perhaps, I don't know whether we need to reject it and then ourselves go along and
you might like
consistent with highways.
You might like to know, Councillor Wilson, that I've tried to get buses to stop at the Lazy Otter mobile home park, and they refuse to stop there because it's dangerous.
Yes.
And so there's 80 odd mobile homes, mainly older people who can't get on a bus because the bus company says it's dangerous.
Yeah, and in fact, Chairman, what you actually said is right, and the fact is that perhaps the people building the houses in there would like to think that their residents would be safe, and would actually themselves propose that they put some sort of traffic light system on there, something to stop that traffic, so that their own residents that they're going to be looking after can be safe in their houses.
Councillor Hopper.
Chair, could I ask a question to the planning manager as well? I'm not quite sure how this works. If we refuse this application, could we as a committee ask for an independent traffic survey to be done? Or would it be better to defer the decision to a later committee, get the traffic survey, independent traffic survey done about the possible impacts of the additional housing or any additional traffic onto that road? Because I fully hear what Councillor Wilson is saying, but having gone toe to toe with highways on over the odd thing, that they'll be more concerned about the flow of traffic than they will be about the flow of people, because that's how they think. They don't worry about, unless there's more than 3 deaths, 3 people have to die on a stretch of road before they'll consider doing anything. I believe, and there has to be a high volume of accidents. I mean, even on the A14 coming off the A1 onto the A142, there had to be 9 serious life-changing accidents before they would consider doing anything to that junction.
This isn't voting on the final decision, but what is the view?
I was just about to answer the question, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
First of all, I would not recommend refusing blindly without evidence. Bearing in mind, we have 2, if you let me finish, I will get round to exactly what you just asked me. Bearing in mind, we've got 2 permissions of up to 38 houses using exactly the same access. So that is a strong material consideration. And if we did not justify why we felt that the increase in numbers of people, both maybe cars going in and out of the site and or people crossing the road was materially significant enough to warrant a different decision. So we would need to evidence that. If we didn't evidence that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to use that C word, which none of us liked, which is costs. We would open ourselves up to a cost claim. So my advice would be, if you are thinking of going down that route and highways are not giving us that support, then the only logical option would be to get a third party report and then to find out what it says. Now, I couldn't tell you what it's going to say because I am no expert, but and I then revert back to my previous comments that any works which then are required to the highways then would then need to give the consent for, because obviously it's their land and we can't force them to. But I certainly would be very nervous about refusing without evidence, because that's the first thing that will happen at an appeal, is we'll be asked to provide our statement and any evidence.
If
Councillor.
the applicant themselves had proposed some different access to the thing, such as traffic lights on their junction, then highways probably would have said yes, wouldn't they?
I'm moving towards deferring this, so we make no decision today at all, but we instruct the planning manager to have a full traffic and safety report survey done on this application. I'm looking at you. Is that yeah? And we will then, the matter will come back to this committee for a decision when we have those facts in our hands. Does that seem to be, Councillor Trapp? I hope you won't rock the boat.
I never rock the boat. But contrary to what the chairman has said, actually, it is clear, I think it is clear from the, are they listening down there? No, it is clear from the proposed highway works that the road will be widened around the island. It is.
I know they say it there, but it can't happen.
Well, it looks.
Councillor Whelan and I agree totally on this.
It can be widened. It is widened here. It is, there's going to be footway widening, western edge, footpath improvement, both footpaths. So there is going to, and right, okay.
John, would you allow your elderly mother or a young mother with a buggy
No,
and a kid on a
not
scooter to
talk?
cross there?
Can we actually try and move this forward? So it looks to me like we're getting a bit of an opinion here that we defer the item. We instruct the planning manager to have a traffic report and that would obviously include things like consideration of electric controlled pedestrian crossings and things. It would also include measurements of traffic islands and the construction of traffic islands that this third party would recommend.
And their expert opinion on the impact of an additional 38 dwellings or 83 dwellings to that area.
Is this a way forward?
We can certainly ask for the report. I'd be loath to put solutions into
No,
the mind,
it's
into the
to
mind of them.
open, allow the report of the
So
third party.
what we would be seeking would be an independent report on the safety of the proposed highway scheme and whether or not it mitigates the additional number of houses.
I believe that's a sensible way forward.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask something? I'm assuming that members want to keep all options open going forwards, and therefore I would also suggest that for your proposal of deferral, to make that clear, that the deferral is for further information via a traffic report. And
then he'll come back here.
But what I'm trying to keep open is your ability to debate all elements of the
Yes,
scheme when we come
of course,
back.
it comes back as a complete fresh application when we have the third party report, independent report.
Noted.
Now, are we getting very close to an agreement here? Originally, and I think we should still stay with this, is Councillor Goodall proposed it and Councillor Huffer seconded it. And are we, there's a finger sort of snapping at me.
Not snapping, it's gently up in the air. All I want to say is, can I just follow up what David was saying, that should this item be deferred, we would be debating the principles of the development as well, or should we at the moment say that it is a good scheme?
David has already said it would be a wide reconsideration of the application.
I would suggest that you're deferring to allow themselves to have.
Yes, so we're not confining ourselves just to the crossing of the road, the whole thing. And maybe the applicant will consider whether, if they're going to have a passive house specification and they're going to meet it, is it a good enough reason to say they're not required to not to do it with the certificate? There may be things like that. So we have a proposal from Councillor Goodall, and seconded by Councillor Huffer, to defer this matter and request that the head of planning commissions a third-party independent expert report to cover all aspects of the application.
No, the third party report will be assessing the traffic safety element which is proposed under the sort of a plan which has been proposed, and whether or not that adequately mitigates.
But
the
we will
increase.
consider, that's a report, will do that.
Yes, so
But
you will consider.
We will consider all the aspects.
Correct.
Okay, now, we're all clear on that? So will those members who are in favour please raise their hands? That's unanimous. Well, thank you very much, members. You've still got a little bit to do. And I'm sorry it takes so long, but I think these things are so serious that I think they should take them a long time. Councillor, agenda item number 7, and it's the head of planning again.
Thank you, Chair. I would wish to draw members' attention to the planning performance report for February, which is on page 85 of your packs. I don't propose to go through the statistics, but if anyone's got any questions on the performance which is indicated within the report, then I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
This isn't a question on the performance, but it is a comment on the fact that all the pages are numbered, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Well, in which case I will declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much for your time and patience. And as ever, we seem to work quite well as a team.